Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 9th Garrett County Board of Education meeting. We welcome all of you that are watching the streaming and those who have come to visit. If you will please stand for a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by our student member, Leah Webb. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I think the glass is working here. So, smudged up. There is one change to the agenda. We have added, after the approval of the agenda, consent agenda tonight, as there are a couple of items that will fall under that column. So that will become the new E, and everything will move down. With that being said, I will take a motion to accept the agenda. So moved by Jason, seconded by Matthew. Any discussion about the agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And we do have an agenda. I will now take a motion for the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Matthew.
Second.
Second by Rodney. All those in favor of the consent agenda indicate by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the consent agenda is accepted. The October 12th session minutes you have, and each of you have had a chance to go over those. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Hearing none, Matthew has a motion to approve. Second by Jason. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the October 12th public session minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the minutes are approved. Madam Superintendent, would you give us the closed session summaries and announcements?
The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, October 12, 2021 at 3:07 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items: review of executive session minutes and administrative function topics. Jason Van Sickle made a motion to move to executive session and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yay vote from Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paw, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Jason Van Sickle made a motion to approve the executive session agenda, and Rodney Gotfelty seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to approve the agenda with a yay vote from Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paul, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Topics discussed in the closed session include the following: executive session minutes, September 14th, 2021. Matthew Paul made a motion to approve the minutes. Rodney Gotfelty seconded the motion. Final resolution. Motion carried. Yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paw, and Jason Van Sickle. September 22nd, 21 executive session minutes. Monica Rinker made a motion to approve the minutes, and Rodney Gotfelty seconded the motion. Final resolution. Motion carried. Yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paw, and Jason Van Sickle. September 30, 2021 executive session minutes. Rodney Gotfelty made a motion to approve the minutes, and Matthew Paw seconded the motion. Final resolution. Motion carried with yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paw, and Jason Van Sickle. The board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered these topics, but did not take any action on the items. Mr. Rodney Gotfelty made a motion to close executive session, and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. The motion carried with yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Gotfelty, Matthew Paw, and Jason Van Sickle. The executive session ended at 6:07 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, Board President, Mrs. Monica Rinker, Board Vice President, and Board members, Mr. Rodney Gotfelty, Dr. Matthew Paw, Mr. Jason Van Sickle were in attendance. Also in attendance for part or all of the meeting were Mrs. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Dr. Jane Wildison, Director of Human Resources, Dr. Nicole Miller, Chief Academic Officer, Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, and Ms. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent. That's all.
Okay. Do you have any announcements?
I do have announcements. November 9th, end of the grading period already. November 11th, Veterans Day. November 12th is the May Board Service Academy virtual, what the blueprint means for collective bargaining from 9:30 to 12. I think most of us are attending that. November 24th, students will be dismissed 3 hours early. November 25th through 29th, Thanksgiving, schools will be closed. And then December 2nd is 7th, or is our next staff development with students dismissed 3 hours early.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to some recognitions. Our first one, most appropriately, is Veterans Day Proclamation. We have two guests with us. Gentlemen, if you would stand and maybe tell us a little bit about where you're working and what you're doing, and we'll read the proclamation.
Okay, I'm Major Hirschfeld. I'm the Garrett instructor up at Northern High School. Sergeant Ramos is my sidekick. We work together. There's a sister program down here at Southern High School. They have more cadets, but they have fewer instructors, unfortunately. So it's our pleasure to work with some of the most difficult students, but also some of the most amazing and kids that really need a place in the school. We provide that. We give them a lot of structure, and we do that with the military model, the Army model. So that's kind of what we do.
Sure. And our program, I would say, it has been very proven effective. Out of our last class, we have 3 of our cadets that joined in the military contracts, Army, Navy, not Army, Marine Corps, and one of them is going to be an Army Ranger. And we have another student, a cadet Medlin. He was accepted in the University of Maryland with a scholarship. And part was because of the kind of values that he learned in the program. So,
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Any questions for anyone? Questions? Major Hirschfeld, I'm glad I didn't read the introduction to you. I was going to give you a huge pay increase because it said Major General. Why in the world would a Major General be working for the school system?
It's a great place to work.
Well, it's a great place to work, but also no Major Generals don't. They're well paid.
Stars down here.
They're well paid. It's an honor to me to do this. I was actually a 6-year veteran of the West Virginia Air National Guard out of college, so I'm somewhat of a veteran, I guess. I guess I am a veteran of that. Veterans Day was certainly declared on November 11th for a reason. I think Matthew, one of my ex-students, will know that reason. It was the end of the Great War, 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour. So that was the day that Armistice Day was created, and later changed to Veterans Day by Dwight Eisenhower. So a little bit of history lesson that I'm sure Matthew could have done. Whereas on November 11th, 2021, we observe Veterans Day, which is set aside nationally to honor the service and sacrifice of the men and women of the armed forces, our veterans. And whereas proclaiming the first Veterans Day of 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower called on all citizens to solemnly remember the sacrifices of all those who fought so valiantly on the seas, in the air, and on foreign shores, to preserve our heritage of freedom, and to let us reconsecrate ourselves to the task of promoting and enduring peace, so that their efforts shall not have been in vain. And whereas, if we are to pass the torch of freedom from generation to generation, Veterans Day must also be a day of education, wherein children must be taught the foundational principles of our country and instilled with a sense of duty, honor, responsibility of its preservation. And whereas the recognition of our veterans goes beyond their past or current sacrifices on the battlefield to our appreciation of those who, by answering the call of duty, have inspired our nation with the courage, compassion, and dedication to their communities and citizenry. And that now, therefore, let it be resolved, Garrett County Board of Education hereby expresses our most sincere gratitude to the many living veterans and to those who paid the ultimate price for our freedom, resolve ourselves to upholding their legacy of justice, liberty, and opportunity for all. And be it further resolved that we desire to honor our veterans by encouraging our employees in their teaching of the history of the veterans' sacrifices and the importance of their contributions. And be it further resolved that we thank our veterans and veterans organizations for their service in our community, especially as it relates to their programs to educate children about Americans' foundational principles and the value of their preservation. And be it further resolved that the public schools shall conduct appropriate patriotic exercises in accordance with Title 07, Section 103, Section 105 of the Maryland Educational Code. In witness whereof, as the members of the Board of Education of Garrett County, hereunto, set our hands this 11th day of November 2021. So it's with great gratitude that each of us thank you for your service. And if we can get a picture, we do. Out here somewhere. I think Leah's gonna do the honors.
Who wants to be in the picture with us?
Oh, no, we want you to. Come on.
That's all I heard. That would be awesome. What in the world is this guy doing here?
Just the major.
Oh, right.
Everybody. Oh, yeah, no. Gotta get the
You want it for a match for the outstanding study for the
Isolated and ready.
minutes and we're okay.
I think I took them.
I don't think I'm in mine. Yeah, I think you did. Yeah, she has it in her hand. Okay. We're all smiling under there.
We don't see cameras with very much technology.
Would you, gentlemen, would you mind staying? Our representative,
Oh,
we
yeah.
were going to recommend, who's doing American Education?
Yeah.
Mr. Damon was not able to join us. Would you mind staying as two of our teachers for American Education Week? And you could be recognized as well for American Education Week, if you don't mind. Mr. Lloyd, our representative, wasn't able to be here, I guess, after all. So we have these, three lovely people stay for the recognition for American Education.
Super, super.
Thank you.
I think the Reverend Dr. Paul is gonna do that.
Yes.
I think school psychology.
No, I'm sorry, we got Dr. Gotfelty over there.
Yeah, don't forget me. And we don't want to forget our school psychologist. So, we're proclaiming, November 8th through 12th, National School Psychology Awareness Month. And whereas all children and youth learn best when they are healthy, supported, and receive an education that enables them to strive, grow, and thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. And children's mental health is directly linked to their learning and development, and the learning environment provides an optimal context to promote good mental health. And whereas sound psychological principles are integral to instruction and learning, social and emotional development, prevention, early intervention, and school safety, and supporting cultural diverse student populations. And whereas school psychologists are specially trained to deliver a continuum of mental health services and academic supports that lower barriers to teaching and learning. And whereas school psychologists are trained to assess student and school-based barriers to learning, as well as individual strengths, utilize database decision-making, implement research-driven prevention and intervention strategies, and evaluate outcomes and improve accountability. And whereas, therefore, we, the Garrett County Board of Education, do hereby proclaim November 8th through 12th, 2021, as School Psychology Awareness Week in Garrett County, Maryland, and commend observance to all of our citizens. So, Allison,
And Mr. Hummel as well.
and Mr. Humphrey, yes, guys.
The supervisor as well.
You guys want to say anything, Allison?
Yeah, I don't really have it.
You did well.
Thanks, Ron.
Leah, may I take a picture, please? Oh, yep. I got it.
Go on, Leah. Sleep with the camera.
You have a new job. Yeah, we're gonna leave you assigned to you. Now.
Look at Ronnie. The former health officer. Don't take the picture, Leah.
I was cheating.
I didn't.
Don't take the picture.
There's nothing incriminating, Mr.
One piece of clothing.
Okay, we'll get a vertical one or two. All right. We're good.
Dr. Paul, you have me announce that, these three, wonderful educators will be accepting on behalf of all of their colleagues for American Education Week.
That's great. American Education Week is November 15th through 19th. And whereas public education is the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And education employees, be they custodians, maintenance staff, teachers, assistants, school nurses, bus drivers, food service staff, secretaries, and administrators, demonstrate passion, perseverance, and excellence on behalf of all students. And schools are community linchpins, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders, and elected officials in a common enterprise. Now, therefore, we, the Board of Education of Garrett County, do hereby salute our dedicated education employees and proclaim November 15th through 19th, 2021 as the 100th, wow, 100th annual observance of American Education Week.
Wonderful.
Oh, not me.
Oh, sir, you're the senior, sir. No, you've been here longer than me. You're the senior, you got that right.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
If you can line up the same way we did earlier. Okay.
You want me to?
That's okay.
Here.
Yeah, there we go.
You're in the middle.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, sir, you're in charge.
Okay.
That looks good.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. You are off the hook.
Thank you.
Or you're welcome to stay for the entire meeting.
I could see that.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Take care.
Okay, let's move on to new business. First order of business is the Granville Elementary School roof, and this is an action item tonight, so I asked Mr. Wazlowski to present that to us. Before you present, Mr. Wazlowski, Superintendent for recommendation.
Yes, I recommend that we approve the Granville Elementary School roof project this evening.
Is there a motion as such? Motion by Jason? Second. Second by Matthew. Okay, if you'll present, we can have discussion as you go forward.
Yeah, I'm here to ask that you award to Dyke and Applied, which is an Omni Partners contract for $1,499,898 for the roof replacement project at Granville Elementary School for the scope of work provided to the board on page 2 of the document, closed document.
Questions of board members? Yes, Mike?
I see it's good that says it's a 25-year warranty.
Yes.
Under clarifications, when you look at number 5, it says sales tax are not included within our pricing. Does that mean that sales tax are additional into this, or how does that go?
We're taxing that.
Okay, because I wasn't sure when it said that. And then, my last question, when you look at number 9 under clarification, it would be, well, it's a really long sentence, but the ending part of it, trash repositories and pickup service are not included. So trash, like what does that mean?
Well, we would have there'd be a dumpster on site, and, we would just take care of anything that would need to be removed.
So like when the old roof would be removed, we'd be responsible for that?
No, this would be more for like trash, like as they unwrap things and those kind of things, but the old roof would be part of the removal would be part of the project.
Okay, that was my clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Have we used this company before, do you know?
Yes.
We have. Any other questions? Okay, there is a motion on the floor and a second to accept the recommendation of the superintendent that we award this bid. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
And there is 3-1 vote. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I see facility assessments report. I think that is you again, Mr. Wazlowski.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of provide the board with some information. I'm not going to go over this. This is a very extensive study. Started out of back in 2018, 21st Century School Facility Act required that a certain statewide facility assessment was done. As we go forward with future funding and project approval, which is like kind of all part of what the IAC is moving towards in terms of prioritizing projects and making decisions in terms of funding. So all I want to do is kind of show you, we had these assessments, just kind of show you where we are, what they're looking at our FCI scores and some things with that. This is from the state that is provided. You kind of see where our 13 buildings are. The rubric is, you know, the higher the score, you're talking about the age of the facility is what you need to emphasize with this. What's the lifespan? What's still left of the facility? And then a lower score. So you can kind of see the bands on this first graphic of our 13, with our mean score about 54.0. I provided the next document. If you flip or on the next page, it just kind of shows you the bands of where the 1,383 schools in the state of Maryland. So you kind of see where that breakdown is in comparison, all right, to where our schools are. The next document kind of shows you the state's mean average of 48%. And you can see where our buildings kind of line up at 53 down there towards the bottom. All right, so that's the average facility as you go forward. And then what they did is the evaluation categories, in which I provided in this other document to the board, it kind of shows you how they were weighted and what they were looked at. Some schools have them, some schools don't. There's the 17 categories of structural down to flooring, and you can kind of then see where we were as a school system. All right, and then you can kind of see then where we were as a state in terms of our school system. The modular one, that is our highest category at 90, that's as a result of Crellin. Those are the only two that we classify as modular. So the age of that obviously really makes that stick out to that thing, but you can kind of see where the rest of where our schools kind of go with in terms of that, in terms of the building. And then the other thing the state looked at was actually the space efficiency. We were required to kind of send floor plans and what they do, and you can kind of see that in Garrett County, as we know, gymnasium, cafeteria, and auditoriums is area because we share a lot of those spaces where a lot of school systems. But you can kind of see that the opposite in the state, that their general classroom space is lacking because of the growth in that they're seeing down there.
Monica.
Yeah, Monica.
When you were talking about Garrett average FCI by major building system, and like you said, the 90% was modulars, and you said Crellin because the age of it doesn't take any factor that it's had new siding, or I can't remember what, new floor, new windows,
No,
that's taken to no factor?
This is really heavily weighed on the age of the facility and what they consider to be the life expectancy, and where we're kind of at with each one of those facilities.
So would there be other modulars that we have would be what, Broadford?
Those are classified as portables.
That's a portable.
Yeah.
So that's what you said then,
Yeah,
our only modular would be Crellin.
Yes. Yes.
And does that mean it can't be moved?
It cannot be moved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where would portables fall under there then, or they don't?
Yeah, it's in there. Portables is listed. I believe we're in the 40.
Relocate.
Relocator, yeah. We're
Okay.
40, I believe, for those.
Okay.
Actually, it was our best score.
Yeah.
Because they're the newest thing.
Yeah.
So that would be where, at Broadford, does Long Meadow have one, or
No,
just Broadford?
Okay. Back, yeah. I also provided a school-by-school kind of breakdown, and kind of see where, as the ratings went. The one thing I'll point out to the board is we're trying to get clarification on Northern Middle School. They have our roof there at 85%, which doesn't make sense because the building was renovated, so we're trying to rectify, why that's, 85. And the other concern we had that stuck out to us we're working with is the fire, the safety system at Southern High. The life safety, there's a brand new fire alarm system in there. So for that to be, we're questioning that. Now, they also take in consideration the sprinklers, but if you look how things are weighted, some things are weighted heavier than that. So we're trying to get clarification why that's that way based on a new system there. So those are some things that we have to get rectified. We have some time to do that to get before this is completely finalized, okay? And I provided you a FAQ to really kind of look through this. If you go to their website, IAC's website, it is completely spelled out with a timeline, the committee's still meeting, and all those kind of things. If you really want to look into how this is going to be used in that going forward, very comprehensive, very detailed, very, math-driven, equation-driven, kind of comes to these scores. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of provide the board and the committee, an update of where we are, as a school system based on this evaluation that happened in the spring.
I think one of the things, if you could put it up, Jeff, the scoring rubric, one looks like this. Yeah, I think that's an important one for people as they get to the website to look at the top of that, how the rubric, when you get to 60-plus range, the 50-plus range, and you look at the number of items, the number of schools that we have in Garrett County that fit into that range is more than alarming. The majority of things that we have in our system fall into that 50-60% range, which, if you read it, says likelihood of major issues, definite major repairs, or replacement. So we're looking at a lot of schools in need of a lot of things.
But it's not just us. I've seen somewhere on the papers, it said this statewide FCI average is 48%. So it's not just
No, we're not the only
Garrett County,
ones.
it's right.
But we're the only ones we care about.
Right, exactly, but just in comparison to.
Right. And then starting in 25, in FY 25, the states, they're going to be a priority fund of money that's going to be available. And they're going to use a lot of this because I don't know what the state's goal is, but I imagine they're going to use this priority funding to lower that 48 to whatever that score might, whatever the new mean, what they're looking for, 35 or whatever that they determine. So we're going to, any of these systems any of these higher scores, we're going to be in line for some of this priority funding to try to address a lot of these things through that in our local CIP. And we're having a lot of discussions about the CIP. So a lot of that is corresponding with some of the things that we're requesting, as proof of why we're requesting these things and they need to do those things. So it all kind of ties together, and it's a good document for everybody to kind of follow.
You might want to add, Mr. Kozlowski, that the two representatives from the IEC was here, met with Mr. Rocco and myself, and Superintendent, yourself, and Allison. Yeah, you might want to just give the.
They visited. As you know, we work with them a lot of virtual meetings and documentation, but until they actually have a chance to put their eyes on Garrett County facilities. So we were hoping that they took the opportunity to spend a whole day with us. We toured a lot of the facilities for them to get their eyes on things, and it was a very good experience. They're very committed, they're very informed, and I think it's a great relationship going forward with what we're forming with the IAC. Them understanding our needs, us understanding how the funding works, to really move a lot of this forward as a school system in terms of our facilities as we move.
Any more questions, Monica? Go ahead.
When you look at this chart, there's no, some things are pretty understandable. Will we have this on the website for people to look at all this documentation?
I hope so, we will.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can.
Okay, I think it's good for.
Yeah.
But like when you look at some of the things on here, I guess it'd be on this one. Like when they say life safety, what does that refer to?
Life safety is, it's in the document, but it's sprinkler systems and
Okay.
fire alarms.
Okay. What about program support equipment?
Kitchens and cabinetry. for like casework, we call it, like these kind of building cabinets you see in the schools.
Conveyances?
Elevators,
Oh, okay.
elevators, anything that's an assistance to, an ADA ramp, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Site, is that like the ground,
The grounds,
outside?
parking lots, anything has to do with the sites. I believe
Okay.
playgrounds is wrapped into that also.
Structural, is that like,
That's the building itself, the structure.
well, so what's the difference in the skin and versus the structure?
Okay, the skin would be the brick, pointed brick, all those kind of things, I believe windows falls under, and also anything on the exterior,
Okay,
stucco siding, service doors, exterior walls, glass blocks, all those kind of things on the outside.
so that and structural kind of fit together then in a way, correct?
Well, I
Not
think
really.
structural is more like they're gonna look at the actual, the wall, the foundation, the
Foundation,
concrete,
okay,
anything that actually supports the structure of the building.
okay. So interior construction would be like your interior walls and stuff?
Yeah,
or-
anything that have to do with walls, those kind of things. And I
Okay.
think you'll see, I think Grantsville's score kind of is indicative of why we're closing the open space in when you look at that, those kind of things.
So open space isn't really on here, that would just be under interior construction, correct?
Yes, yep.
Okay. So where did, for people that want to look at the document, once it's put it on there, all the information to form these numbers and the ratings, where did that information come from? Like, how did they get it? The IEC,
At the ISC, they spent a month here
okay?
with inspectors. They went through every nook and cranny in every part of our buildings,
Okay.
to gather all this data, put
So-
their eyes on and all the testing that they did.
Didn't he tell us when he was talking about that those were people that were outside
Yeah.
agents, they do not work for the IEC, they simply provide the information.
Yeah, and they come up and.
So they have an objective view,
Yeah,
they have
right,
no.
just objective view, right.
So I guess this third party would be the one that would be going to all the schools in the state of Maryland, probably, the
Yeah,
same,
That team did all 1,383 schools. I think
okay,
it was 4 or 5 of them, that did the whole school system,
okay.
or the whole state, I mean.
Well, the reason I ask, this concerns me, is when you look at our educational facilities master plan that's been approved, when you look at roof conditions, we have one that was poor, which would have been in Route 40.
Yep.
We had 2 that was fair, Accident and Broadford. And that comes from our workers that live it, work it,
Yep.
so I have faith in that.
Mhm.
Well, then when I look at what this assessment has for roofs, they rated Northern Middle and Northern High at 85%, which is not good.
Right.
Broadford come in third, which would have been on our 3.
Mhm.
But when you look at Accident, they rated it 8 out of 13 schools. So that's not really bad. When you look at Route 40, it was rated 9 out of 13 schools. So to me, there's something, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Which you had made the comment about Northern High in your
Yeah.
presentation,
Yeah, we have.
that you had to check.
Yeah.
And then I guess my other concern is when we look at roofs, like Granville, the project is to put a new roof on when it's renovated, but Granville actually falls 6 out of 13 schools at 67.2%.
Yeah.
So,
Grantsville was added as the project because when we were gonna do the air conditioning and some different things, it kind of made sense to wrap it all into one project, because there are gonna be a lot of roof penetrations and that, and just to kind of get out ahead of that one, and then just button that school down and be done for, quite a long time.
so I guess,
Remember, a lot of this is heavily weighted on the actual age of when the roof was done, replaced last, and those kind of things.
right,
So a lot of that, the math weight is put on that.
I'm sure there is also a comparison, 1,353 schools throughout the state, they're comparing our roofs to 1,352 other schools, of similar age.
true. I guess what it boils down to is they're looking more at the age. And here, we're looking more at the true condition, because you know, like, there's
Correct.
different factors that get factored into everything. So in a way, our education facilities master plan is maybe more accurate on the roof, because they're not going by the age, they're going by how it actually appears today, what they're seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of gets back to when I asked about the monitors at Crellin. Like, we have did a lot of work to them, and they look pretty good.
Yeah.
So, but they're going more by the age,
Mhm.
which kind of might be a little,
Well, I remember, this is all about replacement.
Right, right.
At some particular point, it's like your own home. You replace a lot of your you do your, that's kind of what's the basis behind it.
exactly.
Yeah.
But when you only have a certain dollar amount and,
Yeah. But I kind of feel that if there's a high score here and we rate something in our in-house, whether it's the education facility master plan or the comprehensive, I think that shows we have a good score on an old roof or on an old piece of mechanical.
right,
I think that's what we should be doing.
right.
I think there's other jurisdictions in the state that kind of use this as the basis.
Mhm.
That maybe take, so I kind of take pride in, well, yeah, it's older here and it's scored here, but then
Right.
when we look at the condition of it, I think that's a good thing for Garrett County, because we're taking care of that. Like,
Oh,
I agree
no,
with those
I
modulars
agree,
that-
yeah, they're
Those
well taken
modulars
care
at
of.
Crellin, they're old, but they're comparable, decent space,
Right,
for instruction. I don't think there's anything being compromised there,
No,
especially
no.
instructionally. I kind of look at that in the bigger, on how that kind of,
right, no, I mean, they're
how the teams perform.
well maintained, all of them
Yep.
here.
Mhm.
And then whenever, people look at it too, you see, I mean, this is actually kind of a neat little chart. The SFA statewide facility assessment, it gives you the score and the percentages on things. Like you said, the higher number means there's more work to be done, it needs to be done sooner than later. But when you look at it in a little different perspective, like the actual dollar amount. So I'm looking at each school, looking at the dollar amount. And of the, 13 schools, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, the highest money amount is the one structural, which makes sense.
Mhm.
And we have one on site, one on roof, one electrical distribution, and one on the modular. But like that was the highest, the percent might not have been the highest, but the dollar value, those were the main things, so structural.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's like the foundation,
Yeah, those are big ticket items.
right, that's why they're,
To replace, yeah.
Okay.
And you'll notice that our plumbing, is on a lot of these. It's just getting up there in age.
yeah. That made me think, when I seen plumbing on here, and I guess electrical distribution would be a little bit different, but we have the same with Johnson Controls. We have more than one phase. So like, I know, 2 years ago, maybe we put in toilets that took less water to flush, and maybe replaced some faucets in the bathrooms, changed lights. I think it wasn't just a light bulb, it was maybe the light. So this doesn't look like that really factored in helping us much, did it?
Well, I don't know exactly if they counted if they took in the actual, each faucet, or like, I'd have to go look. I look at plumbing as more in the infrastructure of the building and the water coming in and the pipes and that, and those kind of things, as because of the big ticket item that it can be.
Right. Because accident plumbing fixture is our highest one, 75%.
And the electrical distribution's kind of the same thing, over the years, a lot of the facilities, as you know, we've added a significant amount of IT here in the last 10 to 15 years. And, there's upgrades in electrician that kind of naturally need to happen on the age of a building.
Right.
So
Okay.
those are pointed out in this thing.
Well, I just wasn't sure if the Johnson, what we have going then helped us, but it probably really didn't, and what they're looking for then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I think that was my questions for right now.
Any other questions? All right, Rod?
Yeah, I think the issue is how's the SCI score going to be used? And if it's used to help us when we want to do a project, and if they say, hey, you got a high SCI score, we're going to help you fund that. That'd be great. If it gets to the point where it's so high that they say it's not worth putting money into that school, then that's a problem.
Right.
So how they're using it is really something that, I think we have to watch.
And I'm optimistic that this is also gonna pry funding away from some of the bigger counties, to healthcare counties. Like when they look at, you know what I mean? Like when you talk about priority funding, we have things, because a lot of times the majority of the funding goes to the big eight and those kind of things. So I'm hoping this kind of helps them.
I think we gotta keep in mind, the funding we're gonna ask for is still pretty low compared, you know, if you look at the expenditures we've made in the last 10 years
I
of
know.
state dollars,
I know.
what we'd be asking for in the next 10 years would be pretty minor compared to what a lot of jurisdictions have gotten.
Sure.
So just keep that in mind too, I think. Yeah. Just one point when we move forward.
Absolutely.
But honestly, I think the FCI score can help us to get funding on some of these projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. McCloskey.
Okay, no problem.
Before we move on to that one, can we come for public comment?
Sure.
Around that time. I don't either, but we just want to make sure.
Yeah, I can go ahead and read the one.
And this is-
Well, that's a good question. Will be part of our CIP now discussion?
I don't think you can use it.
But I mean, will it be, will they want it to be a certain percent for the project CIP?
Yeah, we're good, we have that.
I just thought we should have asked about the CIP.
We didn't have any?
Okay, we do have one public comment that was sent into, tonight. And this public comment comes from, Karen Major. Dear Mr. Thomas Woods and board members, as you know, there's a substitute shortage. School principals have been working hard to meet students' needs through creative means. Instructional specialists have stepped up to become long-term classroom teachers. Long-term substitutes have been asked to fill in other classes as needed, and vice principals have also filled in the gaps. It's time for the staff at the central office to step up as well. A quick look at the central office directory shows that there are 56 staff members who work at the central office and/or Dennett Road. Therefore, I recommend that every central office employee worker who has ever taught begin filling the substitute shortage by filling empty substitute positions. One way this can be done is by requiring central office staff, including the superintendent, to substitute one day each week. That would make about 10 staff available for subbing each day. This would not meet the need for long-term substitutes, but it would go a long way in easing the burden of the school staff. Therefore, I recommend that every central office staff worker who has ever taught begin filling the substitute shortage by filling empty substitute positions. Thank you for your comments, and it'll certainly be a part of the public record. The board has decided that public comments are certainly welcome by the public to come personally to our meetings and present those comments. We will still accept comments via email. However, in order to speed up the process of meetings, we will make that part of the public record, but they will not be read until further notice to speed up our meetings. But we do encourage people to come. We hope that you'll come to our meetings and be a part of the school systems moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Superintendent Baker, you're going to lead us through the roadmap for recovery with the blueprint for Maryland's future.
Dr. Miller will do most of the presentation. She is our liaison coordinator, blueprint coordinator. So she has taken the lead on all things blueprint thus far. So she will do the majority of the presentation, and except for the title page and the next slide, and I have a couple of things, and then we'll turn it back over to Dr. Miller. Okay. So this is certainly a compilation of work that has occurred with many people contributing. Of course, Dr. Williston, Ms. Schweitzer have been integral in this, and Ms. Baker has some components as well. So I'm glad that those people are all here, because if there are questions, they can help address. But as the interim blueprint coordinator, I'll be speaking to most of the blueprint stuff today. But I did want you to know it was a team effort, and we have multiple people involved. And I will say, you put the interim on there right now. Well, sorry, that's true. Right now, she is the interim coordinator. We're still working out all of the duties of the coordinator. So most districts appointed an interim until we had more information about all that position would entail. So for now, it is interim. doing a marvelous job at the interim, so, but you mentioned it, so I thought I'd clarify. Well, it definitely is gonna take a whole system approach and a lot of people, working together collaboratively, both within the system and outside the system as well, our stakeholder groups, to make this happen. So let's set the stage on what we're talking about. Maryland's blueprint, the blueprint for Maryland's future, right? So that is legislation that has now passed, but to give you a little bit of historical perspective, discussion started in 2016 with the Kerwin Commission, which many of you are familiar with that name. You've heard it in the news, you've heard it out there. The Kerwin Commission was a committee of individuals who really were looking at developing policy recommendations and funding recommendations to transform Maryland schools to align with the world's best performing school system. So there was a lot of work that went into that commission, and a lot of recommendations came out of it. In 2019, what we call Little Kerwin through Senate Bill 1030 was passed, and that created some funding streams for us, kind of a stopgap until we were able to get the blueprint passed of the state. And it looked at teacher salary incentives, pre-K allocations based on enrollment, some transitional supplemental incentives for interventions at the K through third grade level, and students with disabilities. And of course, with all of those funding sources came reporting requirements, because that's always what happens when you have additional money. So we've been implementing those things. Those things have been occurring in our system, and we've been reporting on them. And then in 2020, Blueprint for Maryland's Future went through the legislative process again, and it did pass, but it was later vetoed. So we had to wait until 2021, where it did finally pass through veto override, and it is now law. It is a 235-page bill that is very extensive and focuses on many components of school reform and funding. And I will also say that this latter part, this House Bill 1372, encompassed some components relative to recovery from COVID. So there were some additional requirements that included some summer programming components, providing tutoring, supplemental instruction, and addressing trauma and behavior. And that is all in relationship to COVID. So that's where we're at this juncture. And we are going to be taking a look at that comprehensive plan that includes 5 pillars that I will get into after Superintendent Baker goes over her section. Right, so I've talked to Dr. Miller and the entire cabinet team, and through her work with the lead team, and the board is well aware of the components of the action plan and the feedback that they've provided. And there are a number of system-wide initiatives for improvement. That is our overarching goal of everything that we do in all departments, is to improve student achievement. And you've asked for reports on various functions of the school system, and as Dr. Miller said, really a significant part of, as we move forward, we'll have to center on everything Blueprint. There is so much there that it has to be coordinated together, because we don't have enough employees, we don't have enough people to do a separate, thing for each one of these initiatives for improvement. And you'll see through each one, the one that we're presenting on tonight, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future legislation, her overview, and then as each board meeting comes up, we'll present on other various parts that the board has asked for review. Okay, you can go then. Then there will also be things outside of the blueprint that will be providing updates, and just some very overarching ideas of what some of those things might be. The very first one being improved internal and external communications. We know through the blueprint legislation we have to have a number of subcommittees, and a lot of that work will require external communications with stakeholders and internal communications with our own folks. And so that's one way that what we're doing will be separate, but will all eventually lead together for what is required in the blueprint. So as part of that, we are redesigning our website with a launch date hopefully of January 1st. Mr. Gang's team has taken the lead on that. There were a couple of things that the board has asked for, one being a data dashboard of student achievement data that will obviously fall right into the blueprint plan. One requirement that I had was that the website for each school would mirror the district so that as people navigate through, they're able to easily navigate between the district website, and if they have children in 3 schools, they can navigate through that. Will also be a big part of what the schools need to report on at each level of the blueprint implementation. And then we think we've finally secured our manager of communications and public relations, and for anybody that might be watching or for the board members to remind you, this was the position that Jim Morris held part of, but this person will replace Mr. Morris. Right now, we have one person in HR handling some of it, and then Mrs. Brewer and myself. So we'll be very happy when our new person is finally on board. And then some of the other initiatives are accountability for all staff in meeting these district goals. That will fall right in with Blueprint as well. Formal and informal means of collecting data will also fall into Blueprint. And then aligning all of our goals, objectives, and initiatives with budget and the allocation of resources. And starting in January, you will see how Blueprint regulations and initiatives fall into our resource requests, and then how different parts of my action plan fall into that as well. But tonight we're concentrating on Blueprint, and so I hijacked 2 slides so that we could kind of see some of the ways that that's going to integrate, and then I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of the presentation. Okay? If you have questions throughout, I'm going to sit back down, but we can certainly answer them as we go. Sure. So there are 5 policy areas that are within the blueprint, and just for clarity, you will often hear people call this the blueprint. It's like the shortened version of the full title, but you'll often hear us refer to it that way as well. Early childhood education is a pillar, college and career readiness, which includes career and technical education. More resources to ensure all students are successful, a governance and accountability pillar, and then our high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. So the first pillar that we're going to talk about tonight is the early childhood pillar. This is obviously a very significant pillar to ensuring that our students are ready for kindergarten when they get to us in kindergarten. Which all of you know that we give the KRA, the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. That is mandated as a total, like every kindergartner will have to take it starting, I believe it's next year. That's not a change for us because we've already been doing that. Some systems have been taking small pockets of populations and testing, and they're going to have to shift to testing every kindergarten student. But keywords here is that we're looking at significant expansion of full day preschool that is free for low-income 3- and 4-year-olds, okay? Ensuring that students are ready, they're given opportunity to be ready for kindergarten. So full day is important in that, free and low income, okay? Those are the key takeaways. The great news is Garrett County is in really good shape when it comes to this. I attended a technical assistance meeting last week, just specific to early childhood, and we still have a lot to learn, and there's still things that we're going to have to work through. But overall, at least initial indications suggest that we're in really good shape. There are places around the state, many of them, that have half-day pre-K for their students, that they don't have anywhere close to universal pre-K. And of course have building implications, because if you're having half-day pre-K and you're not universal, and now all of a sudden you're having to kind of move in that direction, they have major space issues. I don't anticipate any of those things for us because of where we're at, okay? Go ahead, and then I'll keep going.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you, but, so I guess my question here is, now we already offer pre-K, and it is all day, and it is free. And I know that we have a criteria, not just low income, there's other criteria.
Right.
And if it's not your home school, you might be placed in another school for pre-K. So my question is, since it's now being offered, this will start in this fall, is that correct? Well, next fall in 2022?
Well, it's that So that's a trick question.
Okay.
So the key word is that we're expanding. There's a 10-year implementation plan for the blueprint. So it doesn't mean that every expansion opportunity has to happen in year one of that 10-year plan. What I will say for Garrett County, and then I'll let you finish, is that we already are offering universal pre-K to 4-year-olds, okay? That's great. We're ahead of the game. We already have that. And certainly we believe in the philosophy of offering that, even if it is at a school nearby. The challenge that we're going to have in our county is that blueprint funds, all indications suggest, will follow tier 1 students, particularly for the next 3 years. So we're not going to be getting funding for over-income students. So tier 1 students are 300% federal poverty level, and that's the population that we'll be getting funding for. Yet we're providing it for all of our 4-year-olds at this moment. Now, 3 years from now, there is a shift that occurs. I think it's in FY 25 or 26, where they layer on tier 2, which is a sliding scale. It's up to 600% poverty, and there'll be some funding attached to that. But at the end of the day, we're never going to get full funding for a 4-year-old universal pre-K. Now there's a choice that we have. We have the choice to have family share, that we can require families to pay their share, or the local board can pick that up. The other challenge that we have is it's going to be something we're really going to have to look at in our county, and that is just making sure that our 4-year program is to full capacity, right? So especially since not every student attached will get funded, we want to make sure that we're being very efficient fiscally, and we want our programs to be full, right? So we want to make sure that all of our classrooms are at close to full capacity. And that's not the case right now. We're going to really have to take a look at that. It has been a challenging year because of COVID and how the beginning of the year started, but we are going to have to look at that. What I will also say is for the 3-year-olds, the majority of our community 3-year-olds that are income eligible, keyword income eligible there, are being served by Head Start. They're going to be a key player and partner with us in this adventure that we're about to partake on. And those kids already have a seat in a community pre-K, because when we think about this pillar, it's public pre-K and community pre-K. And there's a component in the community pre-K that really requires us to have a certain percentage of the seats to be community pre-K. Now, there are more than likely going to be waivers to that, because in some cases it's probably going to be difficult to attain. But we have to remember our partners. And so one of our target populations for 3-year-olds at this point, based on what we know, would be any 3-year-old that is income eligible that's not currently in a approved program. That would be a target population for Garrett County to expand. I think that's an area that the committee is going to have to explore. How many of those kids are out there? You know, we don't know the answer to that. So I hope that, maybe that answers some of your questions.
It does, but then it brings on more, because that was my one question. When I'm seeing 3-year-olds, I'm thinking, are we going to take away from private daycare or Head Start?
No.
So
That's not the intention of the law,
Okay.
because they're a approved, so part of there's criteria, obviously, to be counted as a seat. We want high quality early childhood programming. Head Start has a accreditation process that they have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
They would be considered a community partner with active seats. Now, we do have collaborative classrooms with Community Action, and that is a successful program in our county that we would want to continue to explore increasing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see the intention of this legislation trying to replace the Head Start 3. Like, it's going to be done with, not replace.
Okay. My other question is, we provide transportation, or pre-K gets on the bus. Would the 3-year-olds that would be in pre-K get on the school buses?
So if they're a GCPS student,
Yes.
then we would have to explore we have to explore options for that. There are, depending on the situation, that could be a collaborative classroom with Head Start. We could partner with them and they could provide the transportation. We don't know those answers yet.
Right.
Those are going to be things that we're going to have to work out as we work with our committees to really look at what 3-year-olds are we serving under the GCPS public side versus the community side.
Okay.
But there is a component that includes transportation and us working collaboratively on that.
I have 2 more questions. One concern is, from a parent standpoint, I know that SAVE starts this fall or next fall. I have a 4-year-old that would go to pre-K. Well, they might not be low income based so they might actually get pushed out and not meet the criteria because that a 3-year-old would fit in, correct? The way I'm understanding it, very possible.
So my understanding right now is that the 4-year-old, that's what's mandated by law right now, is to ensure that we have 4-year-old programs for Tier 1 students. That is, and you'll remember that policy we talked about, it was almost a year ago now, I think.
Right.
Where we talked about income eligible and by law we have to provide.
Right.
That's still the case. But the goal of this legislation is to expand. So 4-year-olds, I feel the answer to that is 4-year-olds would be priority. And then if we do expand to a 3-year-old program at a school or 2, then that would be a separate program. It wouldn't be in the same class.
Right. I mean, I know that nursing is not changed. 3 and 4-year-olds, it's actually the parent's decision. It's not mandatory that they have to go, correct? That's
Correct.
how it's said. But I'm sure that, I know there's parents that would want their children to go, but I know they don't fit this criteria.
Right. So that's where we are going to have to make
Yes.
decisions. Right now, we offer universal. That means that we're picking up part of the tab for 4-year-olds. We can choose to continue to pick up that tab, or we can choose to give a family share. But we have to make sure low-income students are enrolled.
Right.
And for free. As far as 3-year-olds, that's a completely different ballgame. I think we need to work through that, through the expansion. Mr. Gosselin.
Okay, so, we're universal right now. Anybody that wants to go, we're funded,
We find a spot
if
somewhere.
there's a spot for them.
Yep. Well, we find a spot somewhere.
So the question is, how is the state going to allocate this money to jurisdictions? Are they, because we're ahead of the game, are we going to get less money than a jurisdiction that isn't? And so, bottom line is, we get so much money right now for pre-K, right? And for Tier 1 students. So if there's additional money coming in, is it based on how, the enrollment or the potential enrollment, or how they calculating it?
Yeah, I wish Allison was here right now. So I believe, if need be, we could table
I'm sure we'll get into that.
and ensure that we're providing those, yeah. I mean, the Tier 1 is where we're going to get funding. I know that for sure. The
So we'll get
funding
more
is going
funding
to
than we do
follow,
now.
but I think we need to wait for Allison. Let's wait for Allison on that one. That's a good question. Hopefully she'll be back and we can get it.
And we can delve into that on the committee that we're on.
Yes, right.
I just have one more question on this. So I know we have 2 elementary schools that do not have a class, no space for pre-K. And like the other schools, some have 1, some might have 2, some might have 3. So is there a possibility that might change? And I put pre-K where there's not pre-K, or we might have to add another 3-year-old pre-K class to a school? Is that a possibility?
So there certainly is a possibility. It's not required that they have to be inside schools. They can be other locations within the community through our partners, as well. I believe I would be safe in saying that the sites that we currently have will continue, because there are 4-year-old sites. That's what we are already doing. And the only change I can see there would be, are we going to require over-income families to pay a share of the cost? Other than that, that's probably going to stay very similar to what it is. We're just going to have to really look at the capacity and make sure that we are getting up to the capacity. The 3-year-olds, many of them are low-income 3-year-olds are being served by Head Start. So we've got to explore that. We have to see what is our target population beyond the Head Start students that are income eligible but are not being served. And then we can tackle that. But we're certainly going to put them in locations that have space. There are buildings in our school that have space. And we'll have to just be very strategic about where we would place them.
Okay.
We're not looking at adding a 3-year-old program at every single school. That's very unlikely to happen.
But they would be together though, correct? The 3 and 4 would be in the same class?
3 and 4? No, I see them in separate classes.
But in schools where you can't, right now, you don't have a sufficient number of 4-year-olds to have a class, and that's why you're regionalizing it to some extent. So if you add 3-year-olds to the mix, could you possibly locate a pre-K in that school if there's room?
So for the next 3 years, we have to do it through expansion grants. That's how we expand, is through expansion grants. And so every seat in that expansion grant would have to be an expansion beyond what we already have. So if we're going to include 4-year-olds, it has to be above our September 30th count. So if our enrollment is above that, and there's students that could fill those seats, we could theoretically write a proposal.
I'm just thinking you might be able to expand if you brought the classrooms closer to where the people were. That might be a factor why people aren't enrolling their kids right now.
Could be. And we can certainly discuss that in the committee. I mean, I
I'm
oversaw a 3-4 combined class. There's its own set of challenges with a 3-4 combined class as well. So we'd have to explore that to see if it was really the best path forward. Okay. So the next pillar is our college and career readiness pillar. This pillar is associated with high school, but it really affects the whole system because our whole goal, starting in pre-K, birth really, and then up through pre-K, is to ensure that our students are ready for college and career post-high school. So, and even during high school in this case. So this pillar is really looking at transforming what high school looks like and ensuring that our students are college and career ready by the end of 10th grade to pursue pathways in either early college, advanced placement, or rigorous technical education. And for those who don't reach that, having a plan to the goal being that they reach it by the end of 12th grade. So some of the highlights to that pillar, there's much more, but we're just going to talk about the highlights tonight. At no cost to the student, we are going to have to provide an early college pathway, which would include dual enrollment with the possibility to earn an associate's degree or up to 60 credits.
Wow. Well, does the blueprint mandate anything that would cause us to have to create a international baccalaureate program or a what was it, Cambridge?
Yes. So it doesn't mandate that we have IB or the Cambridge, but you certainly can to fulfill the intent of the law. For us, we currently have advanced placement programs, so that would be our second pathway that we would probably be focusing on. We could certainly explore an IB diploma or a Cambridge, but I don't know, I have not seen anything to date that would suggest that we have to mandate creation of that.
Mike?
We currently have dual enrollment, don't we?
We do.
So-
And we have expanded over the course of recent years, but not to the level that this is going to require.
Right.
This is a huge deal.
With associate's degree.
Yeah.
Well, do we not have something with our biomed or something, or, no?
Biomed is not dual enrollment.
Okay. But can you earn, I guess you wouldn't get credits. What do you get? Do you have some, I'm sorry.
It's considered a project lead the way
Okay.
pathway.
Yeah.
So I know that there are certain colleges that look at that pathway and they see you as more ready for that career.
Right.
And in addition, with our allied health pathway that we have at Southern High, you can graduate, I believe, with the ability to obtain a job immediately out of high school with the credentials?
CNA, you can
Yes.
graduate with a
Yes,
CNA,
ma'am.
which would be one of those industry recognized. Both of those, what you're talking about is sitting in under a third category.
Okay.
Which would be rigorous technical education.
A lot of the dual credits, like our English credits, math credits, et cetera.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And some of our CTE programs have dual enrollment classes to them. Some of our CTE pathways have AP classes associated with them. So we're going to have to work through this, but it's definitely going to be a significant change and will transform how high school looks and how it's structured and ultimately the experience that students get.
I have a quick question. You looked at the slide before that, I didn't want to interrupt you, when it talked about 10th grade, to achieve college and career ready status by the end of 10th grade. So is that saying that we should start like more in 7th or 8th grade?
Well, we are going to be monitoring it in 7th and 8th grade. So we are still working as a state and locality to define CCR, which is the college and career ready. You know, what is that definition? And then we back math from there.
I have a quick question. So at the slide before this, it said that these pathways would be at no cost
Yes.
to the student.
Yes.
So currently, we have to pay to take RAT exams. Are those?
I
costs
believe
still
it
included?
is no cost to students, is my understanding. But
Okay.
I should preface this whole presentation with the fact that we are still in the beginning stages of understanding this legislation, and the work that the committees are going to be doing to dive into it will definitely tease out the answers to these very good questions. But we're going to need some level of flexibility to understand that what I say today may evolve and change as we understand better the law. A lot of us are serving on state committees to try to dissect this and really understand it. We want to do it right, and we want to make sure that we're in line with the law.
Yeah, the key is school year 23-24, so there's so much we don't know.
Right.
And
We haven't even got a
November,
guidelines for her.
November 21. Yeah, that could change 1,000 times between now and 23-24.
As well as Dr. Miller said, the 10-year implementation.
Right.
So the date,
Right.
but again, the premise is that it would be no cost, but when
Right.
that stage.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that I remember reading that the fees, so like, I'm pretty sure there's a registration fee associated with our dual enrollment program right now. And that, I think, I'm pretty confident in saying that fees are going to have to be addressed, but I'm not sure about testing. That may be a different conversation, so. All right. So, third pillar, really targeting additional resources to ensure all students are successful. So this pillar really is focusing on ensuring that all of our students are provided what they need. And some of our students are in at-risk student groups, groups that may need more additional support in order to be successful. So you'll see some of the different groups listed here, but this particular pillar really is looking at focusing on trauma, behavior, our social emotional learning supports and training, and our student groups that oftentimes land in the lower performing, there's an achievement gap with them because there's a lower performance that is occurring. So English language learners, struggling learners in general, special education. You heard me say the transitional supplemental instruction TSI grants that were in the Little Kerwin. That TSI is folded into this pillar to ensure that K through 3, there's intensive interventions for struggling learners. With this pillar, there's also concentration of poverty funding that is associated with ensuring that students are getting what they need. We're not anticipating that Garrett County will be immediately eligible for that, but we do know that as the years go on, we will. It's based on the poverty formula, and it's starting in the 80 percentile range, so those schools that are 80% or higher, but each year that percentage is dropping. So eventually we're going to have schools that qualify as concentration of poverty schools. And when that happens, that concentration of poverty triggers a whole host of support and funding that is associated with ensuring that that school and those students have what they need to be successful. It includes wraparound services, additional support for mental health. It's just a whole host of requirements and funding that occurs when that happens. So not an immediate something that we're going to have to address, but in our 10-year implementation plan, we will. You have something?
Well, yeah, I mean, that just always seems wrong. You have to have a concentration of poverty, because we know there's low-income students and there's students that are struggling in every school in Garrett County. And so how do you use this money to help those students? So if there's not a concentration of poverty, you really can't use the money, right?
My understanding is that there's a specific funding stream that goes to schools that are identified as concentration of poverty. Now, certainly, we have other resources that we can pull from to address schools that are not identified, but they're ultimately going to get more because they're identified as concentration of poverty schools. That's the intention of the bill, is to ensure that, but Title I services are ranked by poverty as well. So we already have a funding source that's already ranked by poverty, and we don't have any that are in the 80s. So it will be some time before we qualify for any of those. But there's no indication that some of the title programs will run out.
That doesn't mean we don't have poverty in Garrett.
Oh, absolutely doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. But we have the same situation with our Title I schools. You know, we have non-Title I schools and we have Title I schools. We're obligated to offer that base layer to every single school, but those Title I schools are getting additional icing on the cake. And that's already happening. This would be giving another lens to that.
I know this is still new, and you still need a lot more information, but do you think we'll have to hire more staff for what you just talked about, all these, like,
The concentration of poverty?
well, but it's like before and after school, summer after programs, student access, like all these things you just listed, is there possibly we might need more staff to implement some of these?
My understanding is that those things that you just listed off, and again, still
Right.
learning, is that those things are associated with concentration of poverty funding sources.
Okay.
So when those funding sources come in, those things have to be implemented as criteria of receiving funds to support that school.
Okay.
But we are going to have to look system-wide at how we are providing services for students, and that certainly can be a challenge because, you know, we do have small pockets of students across the county that we're always trying to make sure that we're providing equitable support to. And I can reference off the top of my head, special education is one. You know, so we are going to have to look at that.
Well, I think of struggling learners because of the impacts of COVID, and not all students do as well on a device when we was for that long time frame, as versus some do better when they're face-to-face with their teacher. So like, because of COVID, we might have more increased struggling learners.
We may, but we have a lot of recovery funds set aside that are restricted to solely address that issue. And it's through 2024, so I mean, that's a significant amount of time. And I believe, and it could be broader than this, but when I think of struggling learners in this pillar, I think of the TSI funding, which every school has been given a pocket of money to support those K through 3 learners that are struggling to learn how to read. That's typically the focus. Because obviously, well, you know the importance of learning how to read.
Yeah.
Well, and as I said earlier, you know, as we look at the next 5-8 years moving forward, we're going to have to look at every facet on what our staffing looks like and areas that we're going to have to allocate additional resources or move resources to meet all of the requirements of the blue. Sorry.
Yeah, one thing I was just gonna say, when you said, do we have to hire additional staff? It may be some, but it may also be our existing staff.
Right.
So whatever this support is before and after school, summer programs, could be weekends. So we could use some of our current staff to help with that recovery as well.
Okay.
Fourth pillar, accountability and governance. This pillar is really designed to ensure that we are implementing the blueprint in accordance with the law. This particular pillar and committee will really be attuned to what's happening with the AIB that stands for Accountability and Implementation Board. That is the state governing body for the implementation of the blueprint. We found out yesterday that there's 7 members of that board. We knew that before, but what we found out yesterday was that they're meeting for the first time next week. So they are starting to get up and running and starting to move forward on their part, and they will be providing a lot of the technical assistance, direction. They will be approving our plan. They'll have a good bit of authority to really ensure that we are doing what we are to do to ensure that this law is implemented appropriately. They oversee all the funding, budgeting, and expenditures as well.
They're gonna hold 25% of our funds back too until we plan, right?
They can, they have the authority to do so, but what I will say, and he's only one person, but we heard Dr. Kerwin speak last week, and he was very passionate about this topic. He's one of the AID members, and he seemed very attuned to the number of collaboration, the amount of collaboration that's going to have to happen, and knowing that there's going to be some give and take. Like, we're going to have to work through this. It's going to be a heavy lift, and we're all going to have to work together. But ultimately, they do have some pretty substantial authority to withhold.
Yeah, so they're gonna analyze the data and everything and see whether, and then they're gonna use that as an incentive to meet the metrics that they set, right?
Well, I think we're gonna learn about that. You know, they're really in their infancy of starting. And they are definitely gonna look at data. They're gonna wanna see achievement gap closure. They're gonna wanna see increase in student achievement. And those will be conversations, but I think at least initially, my hope is that the emphasis is going to be on technical assistance and ensuring that we fully understand what's expected so that we can provide a plan that meets their expectations. And I think we'll be able to do that. It's just going to take us some time and collaboration of working with them. They are planning on compiling expert review teams. Those teams will be coming to visit and do school visits, and every school will be receiving a visit at least once through FY 31. And certainly that will be prioritized based on achievement as well. So I think they're just as much wanting to help us improve as well.
Right.
So when, I guess you don't know, is there a certain date that we have to have a plan submitted to them?
Yes, as of right now,
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, as of right now, our implementation plan is due on June 15th of 2022. That's the timeline we're following right now. So we'll see how it maps out as we go through, but that's what we're operating on, and we'll just see how things play out.
And that's on all 5 categories, basically how we kind of have to break down the business.
Right. I mean, certainly we're going to have to get significant additional direction on exactly what that entails and what that needs to include. But once we get that, I have full faith we'll be able to meet the plan. And all the plans I've worked on so far, typically they are submitted and then we get clarifying questions. And then we address the clarifying questions and typically are able to address anything that needs to be addressed, and then it gets approved. Okay. So then we have our final pillar, which is the teacher and leaders pillar. It's really looking at elevating the profession of teachers and leaders, really looking at raising the standards and the status of teaching, looking at performance-based career ladders and salaries that are based on performance, that are comparable to other fields in education. It is important to know that our career ladders are required for teachers hired on or after July 1st of 2024. So that is something that we certainly have some time to develop, but are going to need to be really starting looking at that process as soon as possible to be able to meet that timeline. And it's really, this pillar is really looking at increasing salaries for teachers. That's what the intention is is for this pillar, and it also is looking at the profession of teaching and really exploring how the teacher's time is used and looking at just the structure of teaching as well. Within this pillar, 60%, this is a goal, but 60% of the teacher's time should be direct instruction with the remaining focus on other instructional duties like small group tutoring, working with at-risk students, professional development, mentoring, those types of things. So those are all things that we're really going to have to grapple with and work through when we think about this pillar.
You know, Dr. Miller, that might be worth repeating, because if there's one thing that changes past performance in education, when you said 60% is direct instruction, the other 40% of the day is working and
the remaining focus would be on other instructional duties, including small groups, tutoring, working with at-risk students, mentoring, professional development, building the capacity of instruction. And that's all going to have to be teased out. Like I said, that's a goal, but that's where we're really looking at increasing the salary, but also increasing the instructional capacity of our teachers.
most people are always in tune. The teacher starts at 8:30 and teaches in front of the class till 3:15.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, the goal is not that.
Right.
So, you know, those are kind of subtle sentences, but they mean a lot when you consider staffing,
Right.
Especially staffing, be able to do those types of things.
Yep. The other key to this is and this is a substantial philosophical shift, is that the career ladder will be performance-based. So that goes counter to what historically has happened across the nation, which is seniority-based. Okay. So just a few highlights on the mandates, the things that we have to do by law and that are funded through, well, that's what they theoretically say, is funded through the blueprint. But these are the mandates that we know we are going to have to do. And then there's a whole lot of negotiating that we're going to have to do as well. We know that this year, really next year, July 1, 2022, any teacher who is nationally board certified working for Garrett County Public Schools will have to receive an additional $10,000 to their salary. We also know that every LEA in the system has to provide a 10% raise over the 5 years up through 2024. So those things we know we're going to have to plan for and need to start modeling how that will look. I already mentioned the career ladders have to be in place by FY25. Starting salary for the career ladder, I mentioned earlier that the salary is going to increase with this. Starting salary will be $60,000. That's the floor. And, you know, it'll certainly build from there. You can see the next bullet, because if you are nationally board certified, it'll be an additional $10,000. If you're a teacher who's nationally board certified and placed at a school that is considered low performing, it's an additional $7,000 on top of that. So you can see the year that has to be in place. So that's also quickly. Go ahead,
That's one thing I want to say. When you look at the bullet number 2, remember this started with Little Kerwin in 2019, correct? So we have moved the needle quite a bit. So I just want to make sure that that's emphasized, is that started in 2019 to increase by that 10%.
Yeah, so it's not a significant impact to the budget. You do it gradually, right?
Well, some of it's already occurred.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, we're not waiting till the year 2024. Right.
Yeah.
We've been working on it.
That is correct.
Yeah.
However, we still have that goal by starting salary to be
Yeah.
$60,000 by July 1st, 2026.
That's the huge lift.
That's correct.
Get the bottom
Right.
to that goal.
And that's only for
In that
about
amount of time.
not all the other
So,
groups.
yeah, that's something you might want to point out.
Well, that's
This
what's on my
legislation-
note.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so what you will notice on here is that you do not see any mandates related to any of the other bargaining units. So the mandates that are here are all specific to teachers. The other piece of that we're really going to have to grapple with is that the definition of a teacher right now is defined in the law, And we have many people in our teachers bargaining unit that don't fit that definition. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to grapple with. And certainly that's being heavily discussed at the state level too. Maybe we'll see some adjustments to that, but we don't know. Mr. Gottfried, do you have a question?
Just the extra 7,000 for teachers, working in low performance school. That's not a concentration of poverty school. That's something else. And who determines if it's a low performing school?
I knew you were going to ask that question. So that is one of the hot topics circulating the state right now. It was a very hot topic yesterday in our blueprint meeting with the state coordinators. And based on that meeting, I would say I'm pretty confident in saying that we are likely going to have a state definition for what that looks like. And we'll, to be determined if there'll be any flexibility beyond that, but I suspect we'll have a state definition. That's not necessarily what every blueprint coordinator agrees with, but I think that's what's coming. And that should probably, I suspect somewhere around December that we'll have something.
So that's one thing. You have to pay $7,000 more if you're board certified. But are there other provisions for low performance schools that might help getting those out of the low performance category? Is that it?
That's the main, I mean, certainly we as a system are going to be looking at those schools. Some of the indicators that may be considered for that would be like a CSI school or a TSI school or a STAR school that is, or a school that has a low STAR rating. Those are things that people are grappling with. I'm sure the state will grapple with. If we have a school that meets that definition, we certainly are going to be providing targeted support to that school beyond the 7,000, because we're going to want to make sure that we're seeing the needle shift. Now, the key with the 7,000, just so you know, though, if that low-performing school graduates out of it, 7,000 stays as long as the teacher is there.
I guess what you're trying to do is if you're paying an extra 7,000, you're going to have more teachers really apply to go.
Correct.
To work.
The whole piece of this is to incentivize national and board experienced teachers to work at low-performing schools and ideally turn those schools around. That's the whole point of that. In fact, there's a piece of the law that suggests that school systems need to prioritize placing teachers that are NBC at low-performing schools. Okay. Anything, did I miss anything, Dr. Ellison?
No, great.
Okay. So these are the important dates as of today. And again, as I prefaced this whole presentation with, we are still learning and there's things that could change based on the answers that I gave today. Our timeline may change too, we don't know. But this is what we are being told today from the state, is that February 15th, the accountability board is to have their comprehensive plan in place. We hope that that is going to give us some very detailed information on exactly what our implementation is going to need to include. Keep in mind, they're meeting for the first time next week. So we will see how that goes, how quickly they can work. But as of right now, that's the plan. And then from February 15th through April 1st, MSDE is to ensure that we get a system of criteria. So that, again, will help inform what we need to develop. And then that June 15th date is right now the plan for due date. So how are we tackling this work? We're creating several committees that have various stakeholder involvement on them. There's a committee, or a steering committee for each pillar. You can see the steering committee leaders listed here. And those steering committee leaders are going to begin meeting with their committee within the next, their window is, I think, the end of November to about the 10th of December. So right now, in the next 2 weeks, the executive committee, some of the executive committee is meeting with those leaders to kind of set the stage for what that first meeting will look like and launch the process. So that's the next 2 weeks. Then after that, the committees will meet for the first time and they'll start diving into some of this work. We do also have the executive blueprint committee that is in place as well. And that committee is a small group of Dr. Wildison, Ms. Schweitzer, myself,
Ms. Baker and
Mr. Knoll. And then we've also reached out to Mr. Midcat, Dr. Midcat, to see if he'll join our executive committee as well.
So it's looking like it will probably be a six-person committee. So the goal is that as these committees work, the steering committees work, they will be providing recommendations and implementation recommendations for their pillar that'll come to the executive committee, and then we'll finalize from there. So that's a lot. It's a 30,000-foot view. And as we continue to get information and clarity, that's really what we're seeking is clarity. We will continue to provide updates, because we do want to have the best information, and that's what we're providing. We're providing you right now the best information we have at this moment. I'm sure we will get additional information that we'll need to provide as we work through the process.
The only other thing I want to say is many components have to be negotiated with our bargaining unit. So that is part of the process as well.
Well, the board service gathering that we're going to on Friday is how it impacts negotiations, correct? So, we will all learn something, I'm sure, that day. Thank you, Jane. Thanks, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're gonna do the hourly rate change. I think Dr. Wilson's gonna do that for us.
I am pitch hitting.
All right, yeah, hold on.
Family. So this evening, I just wanted to share with the board, as you know, each year during the budget cycle, the superintendent analyzes our hourly rates and the sub rates and part-time employees that are serving Garrett County Public Schools. So the Board of Education adopts the rates as part of the operating budget approval, and then that's set for the fiscal year. So right now, Garrett County Public Schools is experiencing an extreme employee shortage to fill daily substitute positions, including teachers, instructional assistants, custodians, and food service workers. This system is also short on people willing to fill in long-term contracts, one-on-one additional cleaning. So it is our recommendation for the board to approve a 25-cent raise to all substitute hourly rates. The change that is in effect would be on your Appendix B1 of our recommendation. So it gives you, in the far right column, it gives you what the currently rate is, and then in red you can see what the additional rates would be with that 25% increase. While this change certainly is not expected to fix the issue, it is expected that DCPS will be more competitive in attracting qualified candidates, while also keeping pace to maintain the variance between the Garrett County Public School rates and the minimum wage for Maryland.
Should have make a recommendation on this proposal.
Yes, I do. I would recommend that we approve the rate changes that Dr. Wilson outlined.
Is there a motion as such?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Matthew, second by Jason. Okay, discussion? Questions for Dr. Wilson?
You think 25 cents an hour, that's like $2 a day?
What you got?
So, it's a step in the right direction.
But is it gonna make an impact on what you want to try to attack?
Well, when you look at the chart on your memo, we are certainly keeping pace ahead of the minimum wage. Okay. So we're hoping that this would be a step in the right direction. One thing as we're approaching our budget cycle, we can certainly look at this, analyze the data, and possibly come back with another increase for the new fiscal year.
Yeah, I just want everybody to realize 25 cents isn't much. But it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction.
I mean, I agree. I think it probably needs to increase. So I'd like to make an amendment to the motion and increase it to 50 cents per hour. Looking at minimum wage increasing after the first of the year.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. It's been seconded as well. We can have discussion on that amendment. Any discussion?
I agree with it.
Agree with it?
I was questioning too.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we'll vote on the amendment first, that we raise that to 50 cents per hour. Those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay? Okay.
Okay, then,
So then you have to
right.
approve the main motion, because if that would have failed.
That's not all,
yeah.
right, yeah.
So now we have to vote on
That
whether
was
they
the motion.
You gotta learn whether we're gonna do it.
Right.
There you go.
At all.
Right.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
That's good.
that we raise the pay, scale. Those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And we have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Our subs will thank you.
Thank you. Yes, they will.
Well, maybe it'll help.
That's another strategy, hopefully.
Dr. Wilson, a question I was gonna ask you is, how does this compare to surrounding counties?
Yeah.
In terms of substitute pay, in terms of hourly rate?
Well, to be honest with you, in Maryland, I think we're doing very well. There are some districts around us in West Virginia that does pay more to substitute in their county.
Do you think that hurts us in securing substitutes?
I think that is a factor that can contribute to people going to West Virginia to substitute and not Garrett County. But I do think, again, this is a 2 steps now in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, GAV teacher evaluation policy action, Dr. Miller. You have that.
So I am presenting to the board tonight the second read of the GAB teacher evaluation policy and the associated procedure that goes with it. So we obviously went over it last month. There was a small revision that is notated in blue on the procedure. Nothing has changed on the policy. And that revision just is really looking at our observations for both tenured and non-tenured, and accounting for one observation to be announced. And the remaining could be announced or unannounced. It would be up to the discretion of the administrator. And again, that's a minimum number of observations within the procedure, so we can do more than what is stated, so.
Does that make me have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend that you approve this policy this evening. This, in conjunction with the procedure, it aligns with what is truly in our practice right now, that we revamped over the last 5 or 6 years. And it certainly is comprehensive, but much easier to follow, and follows all of the MSD guidelines that are required. So I would recommend that we approve the policy this evening.
Okay, I have a recommendation of the superintendent. Is there a motion? Motion by Rodney.
Second.
Second by Matthew. Discussion. I assume this fits in nicely for what you know at the moment about the blueprint.
Yes, I mean, it's aligned with everything that all the state law that is associated with teacher evaluation and observation, and all the resources that were given to me by the state. So yes, I do believe it fits in with that. I certainly think it'll evolve, over the next 10 years.
That's what we know at the moment.
Right, but based on where we are right now, this is a huge needed revision. And it's a good thing.
Other questions?
She answered mine last month.
Pardon me?
Mine were answered last month.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion on the floor in a second. Those in favor of GAB teacher evaluation policy, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it does pass.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Miller, for your work on that.
Okay, visitation, evaluation, non-tenured teacher policy is the retirement. Dr. Miller, you just want to tell us quickly what's going on there?
Right, so that we are looking at trying to retire because the scope of that policy is now encompassed in what you just approved.
Okay. That's just a retirement, update information. You can also do the yearly objectives.
Yes, the same is true about that. So in the new policy and procedure that you just approved, it included the student learning objectives, which would be the new version of the teacher yearly objectives.
Okay, great. Thank you. Question, I'm sorry.
We actually didn't make a motion.
No, I was just gonna make a motion that we retire 533-63 and 533-60.
Second.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
it's an existing policy.
Oh, it's a policy, I'm sorry. It's
Okay.
a policy, yeah. Well, it's not an action item. Should have been an action item, I guess.
Yeah.
Second.
Yeah, we had a motion. and a
I
second.
seconded it, yeah.
We
I just both
we
them
moved
together.
to retire.
We just did them both.
Larry Moe over here. Got it. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, signify by saying aye, that we're gonna retire both the visitation evaluation onto future policy.
Aye.
And the yearly teacher attendance policy.
Sorry.
Favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. And it's only 8 o'clock.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for retiring both of those.
Okay, now we get to an action item for sure. This is the comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities. Mr. Wodlowski, you are back.
Okay, good evening. I was here last month for the first review. I'm here tonight to ask for the approval of the 2021 comprehensive maintenance plan for Garrett County Public Schools.
Mr. Baker, you have a reservation.
Yes, there were, significant time spent last month reviewing this. Didn't receive any questions or revisions from the last month to this, so my recommendation is that we approve, Mr. Wodlowski's submission this evening.
Is there a motion as such? Motion by Matthew, second by Jason. We can now have discussion. Any further questions about, the, comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities?
I asked on mine last month,
Okay.
and I believe this is one you said where we had our vehicles listed with insurance, is that correct? That was in here, or was the other one?
That was the old version of the document.
Right, so where did, because I read that last month, that it's no longer here, because you said that it had changed, which it has. So where is that? It's not a document
Well,
anymore?
I took that same document and I just slid it in with how I prepare the budget now.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So we'll see it in the
So-
budget then?
Yeah,
Or-
I still track all that as part of the budget process
Uh-huh.
as opposed to this plan here.
Okay.
Yep.
So then we will see it in the budget we get then? Or no?
It's kind of like my process, a worksheet on how to adopt the budget, but
Okay. Because like it was a good thing, like it showed when vehicles were way past their use of life and you had,
Okay.
we knew that like the next budget anticipation was if there was enough funds, you would replace this vehicle.
Sure.
Like you had the schedule, and even with our mowers at the school.
Yep.
Like that was.
yeah, we still keep all that. But I can talk to Superintendent Baker and if she wants to provide that, to the board. I can work with her on that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Those in favor of adopting comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is adopted.
Thank you, and thank you. Mr.
Yeah, thank you
Wodlowski,
for all your work. It's a lot of work. Mr. Huddle, enrollment data, by county and school, yeah.
Yeah, last month, if you remember, we did present some overall enrollment, and you did ask for it to be delineated by school. So, thanks to Mr. Hummel, and he will be giving us the data by school.
Yeah, and just to give you an update from last month, we gave you an estimate of where we were at. I wish I could come back and say the enrollment improved, but our estimate was pretty accurate. And we're still seeing about a 280 student decrease over the last 2 years. So, but based on the request, there it is. We will go over, so you can see it's tough to see up there, but this is broken down by school, how many students are in each school by grade. So, and then you can see the total out to the right, and this is on the board docs for the community to see as well. But to break it down even more to show what has happened with the trends from 2019 to now, you can see each school is broken down, and for the most part, there's a negative sign in front of every school building. I think the only one, if I remember correctly, that does not have a negative is Northern High, and COVID played a role with that, with some retentions and that kind of thing based on what we've experienced through the pandemic. So, but like I said last time, it's the trend hasn't been good for a while, and I think this kind of just reinforces where we're at with enrollment, so.
Questions for Mr. Hummel?
So you,
Obviously, it's one of our great concerns in our county. It is, we continue to lose significant amount of students year after year after year. Obviously, some it's COVID related, but some certainly not COVID related. It has to do with a lot of factors. But let's present obvious problem. Anything else you want to add to it?
So this roughly still puts us down a little over 1,000 students from 2010, correct?
I'd have to go back and look. I know it was up around 800 when, looking, not having the slide in front of me. But I know it was close to 800 if I remember correctly over that span that we had
No.
laid out.
I would say on average, that's probably very close. I think we've averaged about 100, or, there's a couple years where it was a little bit more stable, and then the next year it was about 120. So I would say that's probably pretty close. We can get to the exact numbers though.
No, I think I have it in the past, I was thinking.
Yeah, the greatest decrease has been the last 2 years, and there was an earlier decrease back around that time, 2010, and then it kind of, if I remember correctly, the chart that leveled out a little bit. We still decreased, but
Well, as we look at projections, the picture remains pretty much the same.
yeah, and it does, and that's what I said last time. I've been, before I was in this seat, watching the board meetings and the projections that our enrollment was in a decline, and there was always questions about that, and the numbers continue to decline. It's just not based on the pandemic. That probably has enhanced it, but the projections were saying that we're.
The Maryland Department of Planning has been remarkably accurate, pretty close. Any other things?
Any other questions, Monica?
So you were saying that all of our schools had a decrease in enrollment?
Yeah.
Well, I pulled up my paper, looked at, it could be wrong, but paper that was given to us last year, or showing our enrollment a year ago, like I had Crowlin at 123 last year with enrollment. When you look at this, enrollment this year is 132. So I believe they have an increase. And then,
But if you go back to 2019, they were at 135, so we still dropped in that 2-year period.
right,
It's about 3.
It's not just from last year, it's 2 years.
okay, well, I was just looking at, thinking
Yeah.
last year. If you look from
Yeah,
last
there's a
year to
2-year
this year.
variance.
Right, and then Route 40 had, they have 122 now, and they had 119, so, but yeah, you're looking at the 2-year variance, and I was looking at from last year to this year. So actually, if you go by 1 year, we have 2 schools that have a little bit of an increase.
That 2-year span, like I said, we still are around 280 students down compared to what we were,
Right.
which is a huge impact to our education system.
Any other questions for Mr. Owens?
So
Thank
these,
you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
these are numbers that go to everything, like for the state, correct?
The official number.
Yep.
Yep, that's
That's what we're gonna get reimbursement for. That number means a lot in
Right.
terms of how much money we're gonna get.
I don't know.
Okay, Ms. Wilson.
Okay, so I wanted to give you all an update on the training committee that I joined with my Maryland Committee of SMOGs. We are going to work with external organizations and other alumni to set up different training sessions throughout the next few years, as well as drafting a handbook for future SMOGs that may need guidance on how to fulfill their positions. We also met with Delegate Ledke to discuss a SMOG statewide voting rights bill. That would become, I guess, more important within the next few years once discussion really starts. But as of right now, we are just drafting and discussing exactly what we want to ask for, how much, things like that. So for GCSC, we are going to have our first General Assembly this Friday, November 12th. This will include workshops about MASC, which is the Maryland Association of Student Councils. We're also going to discuss leadership, as well as the functions of the Board of Education and what I do and what we all do specifically, just so that student leaders can have a better understanding of how they can influence certain things through the Board of Ed and the importance of it. Because I think to a certain extent, we've noticed within GCSC, there's a lack of understanding of what our roles are. So, in addition to that, the main concern that I have found over the past few months and things that have been brought up to me in particular are that students and teachers are struggling to figure out the best way to keep quarantine students caught up Many feel that when they switch to the distance learning setup, they struggle to find continuity between learning within the classroom and learning at home. And this is an issue that's been relevant for years at this point. But a lot of students are lagging behind. I've had honors and AP students come up to me and tell me that they're failing and that they've never failed before, and that they just feel as though there's a disconnect between their teachers and people that can help them get back on track. Teachers as well have reported to me that they feel sort of lost in how to keep connections with these students and how to make what they're teaching and learning in the classroom continuous with what's going on at home when students get quarantined. I understand that this isn't 100% possible in any way, but many are hoping for a more definite procedure as to how to provide work and instruction to these students, especially in a way that can be more engaging at home. But that was a really huge issue that was brought up to me, so I felt the need to bring it up to you all as well. And I would love to work with whoever, if I can be involved in a way to implement certain procedures to help these students, or if at a student council level or GCSC level, we can figure out something to help these guys out. But I would love to hear thoughts on that. I can email, call.
Are lectures available to the people that are home, the students that are home? I mean, can you look at a recorded,
Not in every classroom. Some teachers post video recorded lessons. Some host Google Meets, but there are teachers that do not provide any type of online lecturing.
I think that would be helpful, really.
I agree, and that's what a lot of students have suggested as well. But it differs according to classroom and according to classroom needs, so.
I mean, you could make it available like 10 minutes after the class if you really wanted to, if you.
Yes.
So it might be a delayed.
Yeah.
I think some students are looking back at what the teacher taught last year. I think you get into last year's lessons, it was all virtual, and some kids are doing that. You gotta
They work
look
in
to that
some
one
classes.
thing.
They should still be
Some
available
classes,
because
there's a math class.
But
Yeah.
if you could watch a lecture, I mean, that's really one of the values of being in class, and, you know, you'd probably be able to listen to questions that are being asked and everything. Might not be able to ask them, but, I'm sure they have time that you can
Right.
call in and ask questions if you want, but
Absolutely.
we really ought to try to make those available.
Yeah, at the high school level, it's very easy. You know, certainly at the elementary level, it's probably
Oh,
not
that's
applicable.
great.
Middle school level, in some classes, some others. I would think at the high school level. Dr. Miller, can I put you on the spot?
I think you're going to.
You're right. Is that something that you all have talked about in our recovery plan of saying to all teachers that if you're in a class that can be recorded, it should be recorded?
We have discussed it. It has been something that we have gone back and forth on, the pros and cons, and whether or not that's something that we should require. At this point, the way it's written in the plan is that the teachers have the autonomy to make that decision. So we certainly encourage it where possible, but it is at the autonomy of the teacher as to how best to provide the instruction for students. I do agree with your statement in that I do believe it looks very different depending on the kind of class.
Sure.
And dependent on the grade band. So that's been the challenge, obviously, to doing something very broad and like comprehensive to require a mandate on that is going to be very challenging to implement on the provider side. We do have the tutoring that is in place at every single site that is available. We have the liaison that students can work with to access those opportunities. I certainly recognize that that's not the same as seeing the class firsthand, but there are supports in place at every school, and that was a revision that we did about a month and a half ago. So maybe that's something that we need to be advocating greater, putting more emphasis on.
Just, real quick, I mean, have we requested or can we request feedback of those that have quarantined? Because I'm thinking if kids at this caliber and that age, if they're having difficulty, I can imagine it only gets worse as you kind of go down in the grade band. So have we asked for feedback from parents and students to see what we can do to make quarantine better? Because it's not going to end. Kids are still going to quarantine, so what can we do to learn upon those that have been there to make the experience better for the next child?
I think your idea of getting a committee together of students, perhaps, high school, middle school students together, along with, board representation, teacher representation, is a great idea. Because we all, we're learning this for the first time. It's not something that any of us were taught how to do this. But I think the mere fact that you have that many people coming to you and saying, I'm really struggling, we have to address it in some fashion. I'm not sure any of us know the answer to how to address it, but we need to listen and see if there are some things we can do better.
Well, there's a safe and effective vaccine available for students 5 years old to 18 years old. And so one of the ways to reduce this impact on the students is to tell them to get vaccinated, and you're less likely to be quarantined. And I wonder if there's a really good understanding among the students that could help solve this problem.
Well, I think you hit a very important point there, because there are systems across the county across the state that are reducing their quarantine time, that are only looking at students who are ill having to isolate, but not having to quarantine so many students. And certainly our rates in Garrett County have not really declined. Our positivity rates have not declined. They continue to stay stable or rise. Our vaccination rates are not really increasing to a level that we'd like to see. And it really is putting a hardship on our county to move forward with decreasing that quarantine. I mean, even Allegheny has decreased the quarantine time with support of their health department. And we share the same health officer. So, but because our rates are our positivity rates are not budging, and our vaccination rates are not really budging too awful fast either, which is causing a complexity for us. But ideally, we would like to get to a point where we could address, less quarantining.
Well, that's the answer. I mean,
It is. We haven't approached it, and they are not recommending that we make any revisions until our vaccination rates and our other numbers our vaccination rates go up and our other numbers start coming down.
how can the student councils help with this problem?
So as of right now, Southern High Student Council has spoken with our school nurses as well as our class officers to see if there's a way that we can collaborate to create some sort of almost public service announcement, like a flyer or a virtual flyer to issue to students to educate them on the pros and cons, I guess, of getting vaccinated and their different vaccine options. So we're in the works of figuring out the logistics of that and who needs to be involved and things like that. So.
Okay, thanks. We could use your help.
Anything else, Leah?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's
Any
all I have.
questions for Leah?
I think it was really good when you said with other student board members going to draft a handbook. I think that's a really good idea. And when you do get it done, it would be nice for us to see.
Oh, absolutely. And personally, I'm drafting my own for the next student members that are coming up. I spoke with Ms. Brewer about that at the beginning of the year, so there should be one statewide and then one that I make. So.
Very good idea.
Good idea. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Leah. Board member updates. Yes, Jason.
I was able to spend the day at Southern Middle School a few weeks ago, and we got to work on the Maryland Scholars Program. So I met with every student in the 8th grade as they prepare to do scheduling after the holidays. So it was exciting to get to know them a little bit, talk a little bit about financial literacy and what classes they take and how it may impact their future. So
Very good.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Anybody else? Okay, I need to talk about something that we did do tonight. The Southern Garrett Alumni Association has requested that the Board of Education allow them to do a very significant fundraising in order to build a building at Southern High School adjacent to the new athletic field and track area. In doing that, they have partnered with the Garrett County Public Schools Foundation as the vehicle in which the money will be handled. So we have adopted this evening an MOU along with the adoption by the Garrett County Public School Foundation. They adopted the same MOU, and we will present that tomorrow. I will present that tomorrow to the Garrett County Alumni Association, or Southern Garrett Alumni Association, for their approval. And if that happens, then basically what we're doing is we are happy to say that the Alumni Association has taken on a fundraising effort to the extent of very close to $500,000 to build a building that will house the Lions Club concession stand, 2 team room, locker rooms for visitor and home teams, 2 bathrooms, male and female bathrooms, a couple of very large areas for storage, ticket booth, everything that will be needed to finish that stadium in terms of being able to have large crowds, et cetera, et cetera. So we're happy that this board has agreed to allow the Alumni Association to move forward on that. We look forward to seeing how that goes, but we thank the GCPS Foundation for being the vehicle in which we can house that money.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else, Jason?
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have to,
We are going to go back to executive.
Sorry.
We'll take that motion. Take that motion later.
Yes, sir.
Try. Hang on to the motion.